Good evening and welcome to the 2025 National Championship Final Round. Congratulations to both of our teams for making it to this final round. We have representing the state in today's case, the team with the code LBO, and representing the defendant in the case, the team with the code OLU. Are both teams ready to proceed for me to bring out the judges?
The state is ready to proceed.
The defense is ready to proceed.
Okay. All rise for the entrance of our scoring judges. Can you get that?
They need a seat. Oh, so went over. I counted 5.
Please be seated. I'm going to introduce our wonderful scoring panel that we have for tonight's round. I'll start in the front row, closest to the witness box. This is the Honorable Joseph Welty. He's the presiding judge of the Maricopa County Superior Court. Seated next to him is the elected county attorney for Maricopa County, Rachel Mitchell. Seated next to her is the elected attorney general for the state of Arizona, Chris Mays. Seated next to her is Supreme Court Justice, Arizona Supreme Court Justice James Bean. Seated next to him is Chief Judge David Goss from Division I of the Arizona Court of Appeals. In the back row, starting closest to the witness stand, is Anthony McMullen from the National Board. Seated next to him is Arizona Supreme Court Justice Maria Elena Cruz. Seated next to her is Aaron Jones, who is part of next year's host committee in Iowa. And seated next to him is Danny Barnett Foster, part of the National Board and the host director for the 2000, I guess it would be 27. Okay, with those introductions, let me have you all rise again. This court is now in session with the Honorable Pamela Gates presiding.
You may be seated. Is the prosecution ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, the state is ready to proceed.
And is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Would the prosecution please begin with introductions?
Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Mika Wellington, and I, along with my co-counsel, represent the state in today's case.
Good evening, my name is Winston Mazur, and I represent the state.
Good evening, my name is Emerson Uffelman, and I represent the state. Our timekeeper and witnesses will now introduce themselves in order of appearance.
Good afternoon, my name is Stefan Neliaukov Sala, but today I will be your Lupe Campos.
Good evening, my name is Andrew Laporte, but today I'll be your Finn Omali.
Good evening, my name is Lauren Frigid, but today I will be your Doot Abdulahi.
Good evening, my name is Evelyn Kumar, and today I'll be the timekeeper provided by the state.
Thank you, counsel. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. My name is Russell Howard, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Kavneer Majel.
Good evening, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kenneth Royer.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
Together, we represent the defendant, Hollis Trimble. We'll be calling 3 witnesses today, starting with Tajari Hakika.
Good evening, Jan.
George Beck.
Good evening, Your Honor.
and Hollis Trimble.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Are there any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor, the state asks if we may move freely about the well.
You may move freely about the well during your opening and your closing. I request that you ask permission to approach the witness anytime you seek to come up to the witness stand.
Would you like us to stand behind the podium for direct and cross-examination?
You are welcome to move freely about the well during direct and cross, with the exception of when you want to approach the witness. I ask that you seek permission to do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, the state asks where you would like exhibits to be placed after they have been admitted.
So exhibits can remain on the witness stand. If you want to publish, you can request permission to publish. And when the witness is done, it will be the lawyer's responsibility to retrieve them or to determine what to do with them after their witness has completed their testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further from the state.
Are there any preliminary matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We're here for an attempted murder trial. To expedite trial, both parties have stipulated to certain facts. May I approach the bench with a copy of these stipulated facts?
Has the state received a copy of what you intend to show me?
Yes, Your Honor, they've seen this copy.
Do you have any objection to the court receiving this?
No objection, Your Honor.
You may approach.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
And pursuant to Rule 4.2, these stipulations have been pre-admitted into evidence.
And is there any further preliminary matters, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Finally, we ask that all objections are constructively made outside the presence of the jury pursuant to Rule 4.10.
Yes. So what I ask that you do is object, state the legal basis for your objection, just as you would in the presence of the jury, and then you can ask to be heard, which will signal to me that is the beginning of the constructive argument outside the presence of the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, the defense is ready for trial.
All right. For all of the witnesses, I want to let you know you are to consider yourselves already sworn. I know you've had the oath administered at 2 prior proceedings today, and so you remain under oath. For the state, you may present your opening.
Yes, Your Honor. A man with connections. Today you will learn that Hollis Trimble is a man with connections. Connections to wealth, to fame, to corruption. Connections that made him successful. Connections that were all about to be made public. But today the evidence will show that Hollis Trimble wanted to conceal these connections. Conceal them through the murder of Lupe Campos. Today the defendant, Hollis Trimble, is charged with attempted murder in the first degree. And we, the state, must prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Hollis Trimble intended to kill Lupe Campos, and that, acting with premeditation, intentionally committed any act that was a step in the plan to kill Lupe Campos. Members of the jury, today we will meet this burden. Now, taking a step back for some context, about 50 years ago, Don Bowles was an investigative reporter who was looking into land fraud involving prominent politicians and people with ties to organized crime. But in 1976, he got too close to uncovering the truth and was killed by a car bomb. You will hear how the mystery of who exactly ordered the hit on Bowles is still unsolved today. But you will also learn that the defendant was 23 years old at the time, and that at the time he wanted to be rich and successful. And he became that. He worked with many people connected to organized crime, the mafia. And today, the state will prove that last June, almost 50 years after the murder of Don Bowles, Hollis Trimble shot and tried to kill Lupe Campos. Why? Because Lupe Campos was about to publish an article that connected Hollis Trimble to the murder of Don Bowles. Today, the evidence will show that the defendant didn't have an issue using force if push came to shove. You will hear various people accused him of being involved in the murder of Don Bowles. And how did the defendant respond? With threats. You will end up tied to a cinder block at the bottom of Lake Powell. Get out of here before you end up like Bowles. Members of the jury, I remind you that Bowles was assassinated. But I want to be clear that today we are not prosecuting Hollis Trimble for the murder of Don Bowles. Today, we are prosecuting Hollis Trimble for the attempted murder of Lupe Campos on June 13th of 2024. Today, you'll learn that on June 12th, the day before Lupe Campos planned on publishing his article, Mr. Campos contacted the defendant because he wanted to give the defendant an opportunity to comment on the article. But when the defendant didn't respond twice, Lupe Campos left a voicemail. And in this voicemail, you will hear he left his home address, his work address, and exactly what time he would be leaving the next morning. This proved a near fatal mistake for Lupe Campos. The evidence will show that if word got out about the defendant's alleged issue with Don Bowles, then his life would be over. You will hear his testimony today after he listened to Lupe Campos' voicemail, and he says, "I'm in trouble. If Lupe publishes that article, I'll lose everything and go to prison for the rest of my life." You will then hear how that night, June 12th, the defendant is wide awake, thinking about the voicemail, thinking about Lupe Campos and what he was going to do. And the next morning, the morning of June 13th, you will hear that he drove to Lupe Campos' home, waited for Lupe Campos to come outside, shot him, and drove away. Today, the state expects that the defendant will get on the stand and say that he didn't shoot Lupe, that he heard a gunshot when he was at Lupe's house and drove away. But members of the jury, he didn't call 911, he didn't check to see if Lupe was okay. Instead, he just drove away. But I want you to pay attention to the defendant's words after he returns home from Lupe Campos' residence on the morning of the 13th, and he says, "I'm in trouble. Big, big, life-ending kind of trouble." Finally, you will hear about the police's investigation into who shot Lupe Campos. And we will call a detective, and she will testify that she found a gun in Hollis Trimble's home matching the exact description of the gun that Lupe Campos saw in Hollis Trimble's hand just before he was shot. You will also hear about how, when asked about where he was that morning, Hollis Trimble lied to the detective until hard evidence said otherwise. Which is why members of the jury, at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Ms. Wellington, will ask you to return a verdict of guilty of the attempted murder of Lupe Campos. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. For the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court, Mr. Major, and members of the jury. They set him up. The police let him down. Despite what Mr. Major just told you, this is not a case about a man with connections. This is a case about two people who staged a crime and a police department that failed to do its job. Good evening, members of the jury. My name is Kavneer Majel, and I am proud to represent Hollis Trimble. Hollis is a lifelong Arizona. He did not shoot Lupe Campos, and he walked into this courtroom today presumed innocent. Despite his constitutional right not to, he'll take the stand, look you in the eyes, and explain. This was a setup. Here's what you'll learn in trial. The supposed victim, Lupe Campos, is no victim at all. 4 days before his shooting, he met with a childhood friend in the dark corner of a dimly lit restaurant where they planned to frame my client. You'll learn the supposed victim was a journalist seeking fame, and his friend, a felon with a vendetta against my client. They believe successfully framing Hollis Trimble was their ticket to fame and revenge. Campos agreed that in exchange for $25,000, he would lure Mr. Trimble to his house, allow his felon friend to shoot at him, but claim to police that Mr. Trimble was the shooter. They execute this plan. Police arrest Mr. Trimble. But here's the worst part, members of the jury. Shortly after the arrest, the police receive an audio recording of this planning. and evidence of a $25,000 transfer. But they've already got their man. So they label the audio recording a fake. They don't investigate this planning meeting. They don't investigate the source of the $25,000. And they don't investigate whether the shooting was a setup. And that's why we're here. Because they set him up. The police let him down. When the state of Arizona charged Mr. Trimble, it took on the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Trimble attempted to kill Lupe Campos with a premeditated intent. That means the state must also prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Trimble was not set up. The state will fail to meet this burden because of three things: the meeting, the money, and the mistakes. So let's take those one at a time. First, the meeting. An eyewitness named Tajari Hakika will confirm that 4 days before the shooting, he witnessed the meeting, where the supposed victim and his fellow friend planned the setback. This eyewitness heard Lupe Campos agree to take a bullet in exchange for $25,000. Which brings me to our second focus, the money. The supposed victim's bank records will show that 1 day after the shooting, he received that exact same amount of money, $25,000. And finally, third, the mistakes. A Phoenix police detective was presented with an audio recording of this wedding and evidence of a $25,000 wire transfer. But she made absolutely no effort to investigate these things. Because she did it, we did. The proof will show that the name of the company who delivered this $25,000 wire transfer is shockingly similar to that of the felon friend. And the recording dismissed as fake by the police is in fact authentic according to an expert in an AI-generated audio. All of this is why, at the end of trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Kenneth Roy, will ask you to find Mr. Trimble not guilty. Because when you look at the meeting, the money, and the mistakes, it becomes clear. The state charged the wrong man. Because they set him up, and the police let him down. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. State's first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Lupe Campos.
Mr. Campos, to my right, you are still under oath. Counsel, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Lupe Campos.
Mr. Campos, what do you do for a living?
I work as an investigative journalist. I was previously employed at a small local newspaper called State 48 Independent. As of today, I am currently taking a brief hiatus in Hawaii.
And do you have any educational background that helped prepare you to become an investigative journalist?
Yes, I earned my bachelor's in journalism from Arizona State University, and then I earned my master's in investigative journalism from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication.
Can you tell us why you wanted to become an investigative journalist?
It all started back in the 4th grade when I was doing a report on a man by the name of Don Bowles. Like me, he was an investigative journalist who was killed, but nonetheless, his work really inspired me to start pursuing journalism.
Mr. Campos, what happened on June 13th of 2024?
On June 13th, I was shot.
We'll return to June 13th shortly, but for now, I'd like to ask you about the weeks leading up to the shooting. Can you tell us where you were on June 2nd of 2024?
Yes, on June 2nd, I was actually at the Clarendon Hotel to meet a mysterious figure who had given me a big tip on the Don Bowles case, the same one I had researched back in 4th grade.
You've mentioned the Don Bowles case a couple times now. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Don Bowles was an investigative journalist who was doing research into fraudulent land deals. His work unfortunately led to his murder, but these land deals were always believed to be mob-related. The real killer was never found.
And you also said that you were at the hotel to meet an anonymous figure. Do you know who that is now?
Yes, now I know it was my old friend who I hadn't seen in years, Finn Omali.
And during your meeting with Mr. O'Malley, what did you discuss?
Finn told me who he thought was the true killer in the Don Bowles case, since, like I said, the real one was never found. He named this man named Hollis Trimble.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence. May I be heard?
Yes.
Opposing counsel is using testimony of Mr. Trimble's alleged connections to the Bowles case to prove action in conformity therewith on June 13th in the shooting of Lupe Campos.
Would you like to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state is not offering this evidence for any form of propensity, but rather to show that Lupe Campos' motive was writing an article, and this article was Hollis Trimble's motive to shooting Lupe Campos.
Your Honor, if the state is only using this testimony for motive, then may I request a limiting instruction to the jury to only take this for motive purposes and not for propensity, Your Honor?
And do you have any objection to a limiting instruction?
No objection, Your Honor.
That will be granted.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll let you finish your answer. I believe you were on who he was naming.
Yes, Finn named a man named Hollis Trimble.
Do you know Hollis Trimble?
Yes, Hollis is a pretty big-time podcaster here in Phoenix.
And after Mr. O'Malley had told you his theory, did you leave the hotel?
No, we'd been talking for around 40 minutes when I needed to go use the restroom, and on my way to the restroom, Hollis Trimble actually was there and pulled me into a side room.
After the defendant pulled you into a side room, did he say anything to you?
Yes, he told me essentially that everything Finn had said that day to me was wrong.
Did you confront him about the accusations that Mr. O'Malley made to you?
I did. I point blank asked Hollis Trimble whether he was involved in the Don Bowles murder.
How did he respond?
He said nothing, so I asked him again.
Did he respond this time?
Yes, this time he told me, "Get out of here before you end up like Bowles."
Mr. Campos, what exactly happened to Don Bowles?
Don Bowles was assassinated in a car bomb.
And after the defendant told you that you would end up like Bowles, did you end up leaving the hotel?
I did. I went straight home to begin my research into Hollis Trimble's involvement in the Bowles case.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your research. How did you go about it?
We have a saying at the Walter Cronkite School, which is don't deal in rumor or gossip, trade in hard facts. So for this reason, I decided to take a second look at the Bowles case.
And what did you find from your research?
My conclusions led me to believe that Hollis Trimble may have known who ordered the hit on Bowles and may have also actually been involved.
Did you do anything with the findings of your investigation?
Yes, as a journalist, I wrote an article.
How long did it take you to write this article?
11 days. 11 days of hard work.
Why did you write the article?
As a journalist, it's vital that we create transparency between those in power and the public. Stories like these they really have the potential to create justice and change.
Before you planned on publishing the story, did you ever contact the defendant?
Yes, I tried reaching out to Hollis Trimble on June 11th to set up a scheduled interview.
Why'd you try to set up a scheduled interview?
As, once again, any journalist knows, it is your ethical responsibility to ensure that the subject of your article at least gets a chance to comment. I was doing that for Hollis Trimble.
You said you tried to call him on June 11th. Did he respond or pick up?
No, I did end up calling him again on June 12th, but he didn't pick up again, so I left a voicemail.
Can you tell us what you said in your voicemail?
Yes, I told Hollis Trimble that I was leaving the next day at 6 a.m. to go publish my article with or without his participation. I also gave him my home address and work address so he could find me.
Now, let's talk about June 13th of 2024. You said you told the defendant you were going somewhere at 6 a.m. Where were you?
I was going to publish my article, of course, and before leaving, I decided I need to roll my garbage out to the curb.
Mr. Campos, did anything happen to you while you were rolling your garbage out?
Yes, as I was rolling my garbage out, I heard a voice yell at me from across the street telling me not to publish the article.
Had you heard that voice before?
Yes, it was the same voice who told me I'd end up like Bowles. It was Hollis Trimble.
And while the defendant was shouting at you, was he holding anything?
Yes, he was sitting in a red truck, holding a black gun.
Mr. Campos, what happened after the defendant shouted at you while pointing a black gun at you?
Right after that, Hollis Trimble shot me.
Mr. Campos, do you remember anything else from that moment?
I remember falling to the ground. My arm was bleeding, but I did manage to fight through the pain to call 911.
And while you were on the ground calling 911, did you hear anything happening?
I heard the sound of a vehicle doors slamming and some squealing tires from across the street.
Mr. Campos, how sure are you that it was Hollis Trimble that shot you?
I know who I heard. I'm certain it was Hollis.
Can you identify Hollis Trimble in court?
Yes, it's that man over there, sitting at counsel table, blue tie, blue blazer, blue shirt, kind of blondish.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
So reflect.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Campos.
Good evening.
I first want to start with the meeting. You admit that on June 9th of last year, you met with Finn Omali at the restaurant. That's right?
Yes. Sorry, which restaurant?
Durant's restaurant.
I'm not sure I remember a meeting at Durant's.
So it's your testimony here in court today that you did not meet with Finn Omali at Durant's restaurant on June 9th of last year.
I'm just saying I don't remember.
So you're saying you don't remember, but if Finn Omali were to take the stand and testify under oath that you did meet with him at Durant's restaurant on June 9th last year, you wouldn't dispute that?
Objection, Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor. Under the stipulations, or under the jury instructions, the credibility of a witness is solely for the jury to decide.
Would you like to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. I did not attack Finn O'Malley's credibility. I'm simply asking Mr. Campos whether or not he would dispute Finn O'Malley's testimony of whether or not this meeting occurred.
And so, counsel, what rule are you asserting an objection under?
A jury instruction, Your Honor, not a specific evidence rule, that opposing counsel is trying to establish a clear contradiction between two witnesses when another witness has not testified yet, and witness credibility is solely up to the trier of fact.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
I heard your question. I'm here.
To repeat it for the record, Mr.
Go
Campos,
ahead.
you wouldn't dispute that if Finn O'Malley takes a stand and testifies under oath to this jury that a meeting occurred at Durant's restaurant where the two of you discussed my client, Hollis Trimble, on June 9th. That's right?
I'm here to testify about what I know. I don't want to put any words into Finn's mouth.
I'm looking for a yes or no to my question. You wouldn't dispute Finn O'Malley taking the stand and testifying under oath that you met with him on June 9th of last year at Durant's restaurant. That's right?
I'm afraid I don't remember meeting, no.
So you would not dispute Finn O'Malley testifying to?
Sure, no, I don't remember any meeting.
You wouldn't dispute the testimony of an eyewitness who overheard this conversation at Durant's restaurant, would you?
May you be more specific on who we are talking about?
Well, I'm trying to figure out whether this meeting at Durant's restaurant occurred on June 9th, which you claim you don't remember. You would not dispute an eyewitness who overheard this conversation.
Objection. Your Honor, under Rule 403, this is extremely misleading to the jury. May I be heard?
Well, I want to hear the rest of the question first, so I can rule on it. Complete your question, and then I'll hear your objection.
You would not dispute the testimony of an eyewitness who overheard this conversation at Durant's restaurant on June 9th.
And what is your objection, counsel?
To 403, Your Honor. And may I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, I believe that this line of questioning has already served its purpose, as well as opposing counsel is, again, trying to create a contradiction between witnesses that have not even testified yet.
Counsel?
Your Honor, first, this testimony holds probative value because it shows that Mr. Campos cannot supposedly remember a meeting that occurred on June 9th, and it's the defense's claim that Mr. Hakika, who will testify later in trial, will explain that this meeting did in fact occur. Additionally, this does not mislead the jury to substantially outweigh its probative value, because the jury can decide to consider Mr. Campos's testimony compared to Mr. Hakika, the eyewitness's testimony.
And counsel, have you provided this witness sufficient information regarding the alleged conversation to which you are referring?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe so.
And how so?
I've asked this witness about whether or not he was discussing Hollis Trimble at Durant's restaurant on June 9th.
Restate your question.
Yes, Your Honor. The wording might not be the exact same, but you admit that on June 9th of last year, you would not dispute the testimony of an eyewitness who overheard your conversation at Durant's restaurant on June 9th of last year.
I'm going to sustain your objection the way that your question is phrased.
Yes, Your Honor. If I may clarify?
Are you seeking clarification on my ruling?
Yes, Your Honor.
So this witness has indicated that he does not recall a meeting, and you have not provided any specific statement to confront this witness with, to indicate whether or not he is able to recall it, to not recall it, to be able to affirm or deny any statement with specificity. If you have a specific statement that you believe was uttered during that meeting to confront this witness with, you may choose to do that.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Campos, on direct examination, you remembered the events of June 2nd perfectly, didn't you?
The meeting at the Clarendon Hotel, yes, I remember those well.
You remembered the events of what happened on June 8th, didn't you?
Could you be more specific on what happened on June 8th?
Well, on direct examination, you testified that you were working on your article from June 2nd to June 8th, that's right?
June 2nd to June 13th.
You testified on direct examination that you remembered leaving a voicemail to Mr. Trimble on June 12th, that's right?
On June 11th and June 12th, yes.
But now you're claiming to this jury that you don't remember what happened on June 9th?
Once again, I'm afraid you're going to have to be more specific. I don't quite know what you're talking about.
The truth, Mr. Campos, is that on June 9th, you met with Finn O'Malley at Durant's restaurant to frame my client, that's right?
No, I did not meet with Mr. O'Malley at Durant's to frame Hollis Trimble.
So if an eyewitness who overheard your conversation were to testify under oath that that's exactly what happened, he'd be lying?
Objection.
Yes.
Your Honor, I renew my objection under the jury instruction that witness credibility is up to the trier of fact, as well as the jury instruction that says that lawyers' statements are not evidence.
Overruled. Members of the jury, I will remind you as an admonition that what the lawyers say is not evidence. A question can only be used to frame the witness's answer. Your objection is overruled. Counsel, you may restate your question.
Yes, Your Honor. So if an eyewitness were to take the stand and testify under oath that that's exactly what happened, he'd be lying?
Yes, he'd be lying if he said that we met at Durant's to frame Hollis Trimble.
You say you didn't accept this $25,000 from Finn Omali. So let's talk about the money.
Objection, Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained.
Now, Mr. Campos, despite your denying the claim that you accepted $25,000 from Finn Omali, let's talk about...
Objection, Your Honor.
Counsel, can you please lay some foundation regarding this issue? This witness has not testified to anything related to this topic.
Yes, Your Honor. Let's talk about your financials, Mr. Campos. On June 14th of last year, you received a wire transfer of $25,000. That's right?
Yes, I received it from an associate who wanted to sponsor my furtherance into research of government corruption.
That was one day after your shooting.
That's when it happened to be transferred, yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel with what's been marked as Exhibit 10.
Yes.
May I approach Mr. Campos?
You may.
Withdraw, Mr. Campos?
Yes, please. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
Mr. Campos, Exhibit 10 is your June 2024 statement from Phoenix National Bank. That's right?
Yes, it appears so.
It represents it as you best remember?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, this falls as an exception to hearsay under Rule 807, the residual exception. It fits both prongs of the test. The first prong, because due to stipulation 2, the parties have agreed that all exhibits are accurate and authentic, which means that Exhibit 10 meets a sufficient degree of trustworthiness. And to the second prong of Rule 807, this is the most probative evidence in determining Mr. Campos's financial history.
Response?
Your Honor, the state still holds that this is hearsay.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
The court is receiving Exhibit 10.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Campos, according to Exhibit 10, you received $25,000 on June 14th. That's right?
Yes, I did.
You refused to disclose to this jury who sent you this money?
I will not disclose who sent me this money. Any journalist knows you do not reveal patrons or sources.
Despite your claim that you did not agree to accept $25,000 from Finn Omali, this $25,000 wire transfer came from Huckleberry Finn LLC.
Objection.
Yeah.
Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence.
Response, Your Honor?
Well, counsel, what fact do you believe is not in evidence, given that Exhibit 10 is in evidence?
That the witness disputes any claim that Finn Omali gave him money.
Overruled.
May I repeat my question?
You may.
Despite your claim that Finn Omali did not give you $25,000 to frame Hollis Trimble, this $25,000 payment, the day after the shooting, came from Huckleberry Finn LLC. I'm reading that correctly?
Yes, it did come from HKLBRY space FN.
So let's shift to the investigation, Mr. Campos. You have a doorbell that records video on the front of your house. That's right?
I do.
But on the day of your shooting, that doorbell was covered by a Band-Aid you placed over it.
Yes, I'd put a Band-Aid over it the week prior. My roommate was leaving. I wanted to throw him a surprise party, so didn't want him to see his friends come in.
And because you put that Band-Aid over the camera, this jury cannot see what happened on June 13th in your driveway, can they?
This is correct, yes.
So let's talk about your relationship to Finn Omali. You've been friends since you were teenagers, that's right?
I was friends when we were teenagers.
And when you were teenagers, the two of you agreed that if you weren't famous by the age of 25, you would join forces and make it happen together. That's right?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, under Rule 403, an agreement that Mr. Campos and Mr. Omali made when they were 12 years old is hardly probative in today's case.
Response?
Your Honor, the probative value holds that this testimony would be able to show a motive to frame Mr. Trimble, and additionally, Your Honor, this is not more substantially prejudicial, cumulative, or misleading to the jury than its probative value, because it provides a motive for Mr. Campos and Mr. Omali to frame Mr. Trimble, because, if I may proffer, Mr. Campos will testify that he turned 25 3 months before the shooting.
Your Honor, an agreement that Mr. Campos and Mr. Omali made when they were 12 years old, not even teenagers yet, and with no evidence to say that they ever planned on following through with this agreement or ever even talked about it ever again in their life, is hardly probative in today's case, and it is extremely prejudicial.
Overruled.
Your Honor, may I repeat my question?
You may.
The two of you agreed that when you were 20, if you weren't famous by 25, you would join forces and make it happen together. That's right?
Yes, 12-year-old me had very big aspirations.
You turned 25 3 months before your shooting,
I did.
and you believe that your shooting is exactly the type of thing that would make you famous. That's right?
It's a big story.
I'm looking for a yes or no for the record. Mr. Campos, you believe that your story, that your shooting is exactly the type of thing that would make you famous. That's right?
Yes, my story's a big one.
You believe that as a result of this shooting, you're a hero.
I am.
Thank you, Mr. Campos. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, on cross-examination, you were asked about $25,000 that you received the day after your shooting. Can you tell us why you received $25,000?
Yes, once again, I received it from an associate who wanted to sponsor my research into government corruption.
Why can't you say who gave you the money?
As any journalist knows, it's not only confidential, but you choose not to disclose your patrons or sources.
You were also asked about an agreement that you made with Mr. Omali. Mr. Campos, did the agreement you made when you were 12 years old have any effect on your testimony today?
None at all.
Did the agreement you made when you were 12 years old lead you to stage a shooting?
No, why would I want to be shot?
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Any recross?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Where would you like me to place this exhibit?
I'll take it. Next witness from the state, please.
The state calls Finn O'Malley to the stand.
Mr. O'Malley, please take the stand to my right, and I remind you that you are still under oath.
Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, my name is Finn O'Malley.
Mr. O'Malley, how are you involved in today's case?
I'm here to set the record straight on what happened to my friend Lupe Campos and why.
When did you first meet Lupe Campos?
I've known Lupe since we were kids, I guess. Like my granny would say, or I knew him since his boots cost 4 pence.
What do you do for a living now?
I'm an author and I'm an independent scholar.
Have you published any books?
Yes, I wrote my first one on the Gila River Valley, inspired by my grandparents' ranch where I grew up. And I'm currently writing a book on the Don Bowles murder.
How did you start your research into the Bowles murder?
Well, I knew I was taking on a lot. Bowles was murdered almost 50 years ago, so I needed someone to give me a head start, and I found Hollis Trimble, a local true crime podcaster.
Did you ever meet with the defendant, Hollis Trimble?
Back in the summer of 2023, I needed research help, and he offered to throw in free publicity on his podcast in exchange for 10% of my book sales.
Based on your research, could you explain what the Bowles murder was about?
Yeah, I can try. Don Bowles was investigating corrupt politicians making money off of vacant parcels of property, and Bowles got close to uncovering the truth when he was assassinated by a car bomb.
Where did you start your research into the Bowles murder?
Hollis Trimble's office. There are some pretty high-octane documents that I went through. I also visited the Corporation Commission's archive.
Why did you visit the Corporation Commission's archives?
I just wanted to solve the crime, I guess. I figured I could just sort of trace the money through the shell corporations to find names. I sort of did find names.
What names did you find?
I found Hollis Trimble.
How specifically was the defendant behind these shell corporations?
It's my understanding that Mr. Trimble was the majority shareholder, officer, and director of one of those old shell corporations that Don Bowles was investigating.
What happened after you learned this information about the defendant?
I started getting watched.
Who was watching you?
Tajari Hakika was watching me.
Who is Tajari Hakika?
I know he works for Hollis and claimed to be Hollis's long-lost cousin. I don't know if he's Hollis's only employee.
Did you ever go to the defendant about this?
I had to, and luckily, Hollis didn't seem to brush me off. He suggested we find something else for Tajari to do, which ended up being a PR stunt, somewhat recreating the Don Bowles murder.
What was this PR stunt?
Well, it wasn't really my idea, but I'll give you the gist. I think the idea was to take the same car Don Bowles drove, strap fake dynamite to the bottom, and park it at the hotel where Mr. Bowles was assassinated.
Did you have a role in this PR stunt?
Yes, ma'am. My job was to get an investigative journalist to the Clarendon Hotel. From there, it was out of my hands, and I picked my friend, Lupe.
When did you contact Lupe Campos?
Around the end of May, I got called to a meeting in Hollis's office, and Tajari handed me a phone and told me to make the call.
Did you make the call?
Well, I sort of stammered and looked down at my shoes. At that point, Mr. Trimble put his hand on his gun.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence under Rule 404 may be heard.
May.
They're offering the statement that Hollis Trimble put his hand on his gun to prove action in conformity therewith of the character trait of menacing or threatening on the specific occasion of June 13th.
May be heard, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, the state is not offering this testimony for propensity. Rather, as we expect opposing counsel to cross-examine Mr. Omali on his arrest on June 13th, this testimony just lays the context for why Mr. Omali made the call to Lupe Campos. Therefore, Your Honor, the state is not offering this testimony for propensity.
Your Honor, there's no reason why they would be offering Hollis Trimble placing his hand on his gun to provide context for the witness's answer. We ask that's definitely not necessary for this answer, and it's only being used to prove that the witness or that Hollis Trimble would act in a more threatening or violent behavior on June 13th.
Do you intend to cross-examine this witness on the events at the Clarendon Hotel that led to his arrest?
I intend to ask about his arrest and pleading guilty, not about the events that led up to his conviction.
Your objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Omali, after seeing the defendant with their gun, did you make that call to Lupe Campos?
Yes, I did. Of course I did. I told Lupe to meet me at the Clarendon Hotel on June 2nd.
Well, let's talk about June 2nd. Did you meet with Lupe Campos that day?
I did, and I did more than that. I'd been planning to tell Loops all my information on Hollis and Bowles in case something happened to me.
What exactly did you tell Lupe at this meeting?
Everything. I laid it all out. We talked for about 40 minutes, and Lupe got up and went to the bathroom.
What happened next?
Tajari Hakika entered the room and sort of took Lupe's seat.
Did Tajari Hakika say anything to you?
Yes, he said I was going to pay, that snitches get stitches, and he got up and left.
After Tajari Hakika told you that you were going to pay, what happened?
I started hearing sirens, the police came up to me, and I was arrested right in the Clarendon Hotel.
I want to turn your attention to the day you were released. Did you see the defendant that day?
I did. I'd had enough. I marched right to Hollis Trimble's office, and he was waiting for me.
Did the defendant say anything to you when you walked into their office?
He told me to publish my book saying someone else called to hit on Bowles, that he'd promote that and we could both be rich.
Mr. Omali, what would happen if you published your book saying that Mr. Trimble was involved in the Bowles murder?
Hollis told me I'd end up strapped to a cinder block at the bottom of Lake Powell.
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper character evidence under Rule 404. They're offering, may I be heard?
You may.
They're offering the statements of the defendant's threat to Finn Omali to prove that he has a violent character trait that he would act in accordance with against Lupe Campos on June 13th.
Your Honor, we're not offering this testimony for propensity. Rather, we're offering it as motive for Hollis Trimble to attempt murder on Lupe Campos, as Hollis Trimble has a motive to kill those who are exposing them for their involvement in the Bulls murder. Your Honor, therefore, this goes to motive and is admissible under Rule 404.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, under Rule 404B, the motive of his murdering Lupe Campos is not related to his motive for murdering Finn Omali. In this case, this is about Finn's article, which is a completely separate issue to what was threatened on June 13th, and Lupe Campos' article, which means they have to be using this threat to prove propensity and that he acted in accordance with the character trait of violence on June 13th.
Would you like to respond to that argument?
Yes, Your Honor. I stand by my earlier response. Your Honor, under Rule 404B, it states that character evidence, it states that this goes to the defendant's motive. And Your Honor, regardless of whether it was Finn Omali or Lupe Campos, this goes to the defendant's motive against those exposing them for their involvement in the Bulls murder. Your Honor, therefore, this is admissible under Rule 404B.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Omali, after the defendant told you that you would be tied to a cinder block and tossed to the bottom of Lake Powell, how did you respond?
I told him I'd write my book saying someone else did it. I mean, no one wants to sleep with the fishes, right?
Did you have contact with Lupe Campos after this meeting?
Yes, several times.
Did you learn anything significant?
Well, Loops told me he was publishing an article on Hollis Trimble, which I was fine with, but that he'd contacted Hollis asking for a statement, which terrified me.
I want to turn your attention to the day of the shooting, June 13th. Where were you that morning at about 6 a.m.?
I was in my apartment, just pacing around.
When you were at your apartment that morning, did anything unusual happen?
Yes, I heard a gunshot, and I immediately ran downstairs. I could see police lights in my window, so I ran toward them.
What else did you see?
I saw my friend Lupe being lifted into an ambulance.
After seeing your friend being lifted into an ambulance, how did you respond?
Well, I never even got to see if he was okay, so I did the only thing I could do. I called the police.
Lastly, Mr. Omali, in June of 2024, did you have $25,000 to pay Lupe Campos?
No, ma'am. My book on the Gila River Valley, the sales haven't quite gone as planned, so I'm in some nasty credit card debt at the moment.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Omali, I'd like to start with the meeting. If you admit that you met with your old friend Lupe Campos on June 9th last year, that's right?
Yes, we met at a steakhouse.
That was 4 days before the shooting?
We had several communications, but we met one time at the steakhouse 4 days before.
That steakhouse was Durant's restaurant?
I believe it was.
Durant's is the kind of place you meet someone if you want some privacy, right?
I suppose so.
It's a dimly lit restaurant?
Yeah.
And you and Mr. Campos tucked in the dark booth in the back corner of that restaurant, that's right?
Yes.
You were in court earlier when Mr. Campos testified, right?
Yes, but I wasn't really listening, sir.
You weren't listening, but did you hear Lupe Campos not remember the existence of this meeting?
I was just making sure that detective was between me and Mr. Trimble, just in case.
So you did not hear this?
No, sir. I'm very sorry, but I didn't.
That's okay, Mr. Omali, but you do admit that on that day, on June 9th, you and Mr. Campos discussed my client, Hollis Trimble. That's right?
You're absolutely right.
But you didn't just discuss Hollis Trimble. You and Mr. Campos planned to set up Hollis Trimble for attempted murder, that's right?
No, sir. If you mean the murder of Don Bowles, we plan to publish our research on that, but not any other murder.
Sir, you say you didn't plan to set up Hollis Trimble for attempted murder, but are you aware that a witness will testify who overheard your conversation?
I can make a reasonable guess, so I have to agree with you.
So, Mr. Omali, you're expecting this jury to believe that you and Mr. Campos did not plan to set up Hollis Trimble, but the truth is, sir, you're a convicted felon, right?
Well, there's sort of two parts. Can I deal with those one at a time? You're absolutely right. I expect the jury to believe me. I'm telling the truth. But you're also right. I'm a convicted felon.
In June of last year, you pled guilty to felony disorderly conduct, right?
I did. I was set up.
We'll get to your motivations in a second, sir, but despite pleading guilty, you still blame the defendant for your conviction, that's right?
Yes, I do. And Mr. Hakika as well, to a lesser extent.
You were released from jail on June 8th of last year, right?
You're correct.
You felt humiliated.
I do. I still do.
And after you were released from jail, you went to Hollis Trimble's office and you told him you will pay for setting me up. Those are your words?
Those were my words.
That was one day before the meeting we just discussed, right?
It was.
So just to be clear for the jury, one day after you told my client he was going to pay, you tucked away with Mr. Campos in the dark corner of a booth in a dimly lit restaurant to discuss my plan. That's right.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Omali, I'd like to talk about the day of the shooting. You're aware that Lupe Campos was shot in the arm, right?
I am aware of that now.
And you've been shooting guns since you were a kid, right?
Yes, I shot guns as a child.
You would consider yourself quite the marksman.
Yes, I would.
In college, you competed for the marksmanship team, and you led your team to 2 conference titles, that's right?
Well, unlike my girlfriend, my air rifle works long distance.
Both times you were the most accurate shot on your team?
Yes, I was.
Mr. Omali, when you take a shot, you never miss your target, right?
Not with an air rifle when I'm competing in college marksmanship.
Mr. Omali, the truth is that you don't have an alibi for the morning of June 13th, 2024, when Lupe Campos was shot.
I guess not. There certainly wasn't anyone in my apartment.
Thank you, Mr. Omali. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. O'Malley, on June 9th, did you plan to frame Hollis Trimble with Lupe Campos?
No, ma'am. We plan to expose the truth.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
You may step down. Thank you. State's next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Detective Abdulahi to the stand.
Detective, please take the stand to my right. A reminder, you are still under oath.
Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good evening. My name is Detective Dudud Abdulahi.
Detective Abdulahi, how long have you been working in law enforcement?
I was commissioned in 1985, so 40 years now.
Where are you currently stationed?
I work at the Phoenix Police Department.
Over those 40 years in law enforcement, can you tell a jury about some of your roles and responsibilities during that time?
Sure, ma'am. Initially, I was a patrol officer, and then I moved to detective work, doing investigations. Then I was back in patrol, supervising as a sergeant, but I love solving complex crimes rather than supervising. So I've been back as a detective for the past 3 years.
In your time working as a detective, do you have experience in investigating homicides?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I've investigated over 100 homicides and homicide attempts.
Well, I'd like to move your attention to today's case. How are you involved in today's case?
I'm the lead detective on the shooting of Mr. Campos.
And were you able to investigate the scene of the shooting for yourself?
Yes, ma'am, I was. I arrived shortly after 7 a.m. on the 13th of June, the day of the shooting. And when I arrived, Mr. Campos was transported to the hospital.
And would you recognize a diagram of the shooting if shown to you today?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
I'm now showing opposing counsel what has previously been marked as exhibit. May approach the witness, Your Honor.
May.
I'm now handing the witness what has previously been marked as exhibit 5. Detective Abdulahi, what have I just handed you?
This is the scene diagram that I constructed with Mr. Campos the morning of the shooting.
And is this scene diagram a fair and accurate representation of your understanding of the scene and how you observed it that morning?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
The state offers exhibit 5 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, to hearsay. May I be heard?
Yes.
The initials and the dotted line that are on this exhibit are inherently testimonial and are pointing to the fact that people were standing in certain places and that the bullet followed a certain trajectory. These are out-of-court statements being offered to prove the truth of the matter that they assert.
Counsel.
Your Honor, these statements or these initials that are based on statements are admissible under both prongs of 801 D1B.
Counsel.
Your Honor, I don't believe these are statements by the defendant. I'm a little bit confused as to how they fall under 801 D1D.
Counsel.
I'm happy to elaborate, Your Honor.
Yes.
These are admissible under 801 D1B as they are prior consistent statements. If you would like me to elaborate on as to how they're admissible under both prongs, I'm happy to do so.
Yes.
These statements are admissible under 801 D1B1 as they are the prior consistent statements by Lupe Campos and Mr. Campos's. They are offered to rebut an express charge that Mr. Campos recently fabricated the information that is testified to on that exhibit. This is also admissible under 801 D1B2 as Mr. Campos's credibility was attacked on cross-examination, and this is offered to rehabilitate it.
And just one second. What was the event that led to the motive to fabricate?
Your Honor, in defense's opening statement, they talked about that Mr. Campos was a part of a scheme with Mr. Finn Omali, and that they fabricated this entire shooting. And these prior consistent statements are being offered to rebut that express charge that defense expressed in their opening statements.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I want to be very clear that I believe they're severely mischaracterizing 801 D1B 1 and 2. It's talking about how it must be consistent with the declarant's testimony earlier in trial, not something that we said in our opening statements. And I would like to point out the fact that Lupe Campos did not make any statements as to where Hollis Trimble was standing, where they were standing, where the bullet trajectory was, which are the statements that are in this exhibit, which means that they cannot be the declarant's prior statements, and there's no way to rehabilitate something that Lupe Campos never said on direct or cross-examination.
Counsel.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Campos did identify Mr. Trimble where he was standing that day, and he also identified them with Detective Abdulahi in their later interview, and this was testified on direct examination and will later be retestified to in later questioning with Detective Abdulahi.
In the event that you were just talking about, the motive for fabrication, did that precede or post-date the creation of this alleged prior consistent statement?
Proceeded, Your Honor.
Would you like to be heard on that?
Yes, Your Honor, I want to be very explicit that the rule that they are saying makes this statement not hearsay must be consistent with the declarant's prior statement, meaning that Lupe Campos would have had to have testified about exactly where these initials were placing people and the trajectory of the bullet. Opposing counsel has not even mentioned the trajectory of the bullet, which is inherently testimonial in nature, and I want to be very clear that Lupe Campos has not testified to any of the elements that I am objecting to in this exhibit, which means that they cannot be rehabilitated by asking this witness questions about them.
So, counsel, specifically on Exhibit 5, what do you believe are statements offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted that do not fall within an exemption or exception to the hearsay rule?
Yes, Your Honor. They don't fall under the exemption.
No,
and the
which,
statements would
what statements on Exhibit 5?
The statements would be the initials HT as well as LP, as well as the dotted line showing the trajectory of the bullet.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
Firstly, I'd like to correct opposing counsel. The initial is LC, not LP. Additionally, this testimony did come out on direct examination. Mr. Campos told the jury in direct examination that he was rolling out his trash can as he was shot. That is shown with the initials LC. He also told the jury that he saw Mr. Trimble from across the street outside his red pickup truck pointing a black gun at him. That is shown in the initials HT. Again, this has come in on direct examination, and it will come in again in the later questioning of Detective Abdulahi.
Final word?
Yes, Your Honor. The rule or the exemption to the rule that they are trying to get this in under requires that the statements must be declarant's testimony of the things that are specifically within this exhibit for it not to be hearsay. Simply saying he was across the street holding a gun or I was pulling my trash out of my house does not testify to the exact spaces where those initials are placing those people or the trajectory of the bullet. They haven't even mentioned the trajectory of the bullet in responding to my objection.
The court is going to receive Exhibit 5. I'm going to constructively redact the initials HT, LC, and the court is going to leave the dotted line.
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel?
Your Honor, may my co-counsel publish copies of Exhibit 5 to the jury?
Yes, that has been constructively redacted. Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, now as the jury is receiving these documents, would you mind flipping over that diagram and walking the jury through what they can see on this diagram?
Yes, ma'am. At the top here, this is Mr. Campos's residence. And if you move down below, this is the front yard of Mr. Campos's residence. This is Flowers Street, where Mr. Campos's property is stationed, as well as this dotted line here is where the bullet went to strike Mr. Campos.
Right, and what were your first steps on the scene that morning?
My first steps were to have my lab photographers capture the scene as it was when we arrived. So they photographed the blood spatters on this L-shaped walkway here in the top right quadrant of the diagram. They also captured the contents in this garbage can, as well as a street view of the property from Flowers Street.
All right, and were you and your team searching for any physical evidence on the scene that morning?
Yes, ma'am, we were. Per procedure, we set up a grid pattern search in order to find any evidence.
And did this grid pattern search elicit any physical evidence that was relevant to your investigation?
No, ma'am.
All right, now after conducting that grid pattern search, what was your next step?
My next step was to interview Mr. Campos.
And let's talk more about this interview. In this interview, did Mr. Campos identify a shooter to you?
Yes, ma'am. He said that the shooter was Mr. Trimble.
And did he tell you what had happened to him that morning?
Yes, ma'am. He said that he saw Mr. Trimble holding a black gun across the street. He also saw Mr. Trimble's red pickup truck that morning.
All right, now, was there any evidence that was consistent with Mr. Campos's identification of his shooter?
Yes, ma'am. I was able to corroborate this in two ways. The first was through audio of the front doorbell camera that was presented to me by Mr. Trimble, by Mr. Campos, as well as my later interview with Mr. Trimble.
Let's talk about that audio evidence from Mr. Campos's doorbell. Did you listen to this audio evidence?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what was on the audio evidence?
There was a gunshot, as well as the sound of tires moving after the gunshot, as well as a yell.
And could you hear who was yelling in this audio?
Yes, ma'am. Initially, I was unsure, although I identified the voice as Mr. Trimble after our later interview, where I matched the voices.
Over the course of your investigation, did any other audio evidence come up to you?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Hakika brought audio evidence to me. I listened to it, and I did not factor it into my investigation.
All right. So what were your next steps after concluding your interview with Mr. Campos?
After my interview, I had a clear suspect. It was Mr. Trimble. So I proceeded to obtain and execute a search warrant for Mr. Trimble's cell phone, office, and residence.
Let's start with Mr. Trimble's residence. What did you find there?
I found a cell phone as well as 10 firearms.
Would you recognize two photos of one of these firearms if shown to you today?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
I am now showing opposing counsel what has previously been marked as Exhibit 8. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm now handing the witness what has previously been marked as Exhibit 8. Detective Abdulahi, what have I just handed you?
This is the black gun that I found at Mr. Trimble's residence that corroborated what Mr. Campos had told me earlier about the gun that was used that morning.
Are these photos a fair and accurate representation of the gun that you observed that morning?
Yes, ma'am.
The state offers Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
8 is received.
May my co-counsel publish copies of Exhibit 8 to the jury?
You may.
All right, and while the jury is receiving these images, would you mind turning over that photo and walking them through what they can see here?
Yes, ma'am. This is a black Sig Sauer handgun, as well as 3 magazines and a holster that I found along with the gun. And again, this matched the description of what Mr. Campos said Hollis Trimble used that morning.
So what did you do with this gun that matched the description that Mr. Campos had given you?
I seized this gun, as well as a silver revolver.
Now let's talk about that other piece of evidence you said you found at Mr. Trimble's home, his cell phone. What did you find on his cell phone?
Well, when I opened the cell phone, I looked at the Google Maps application, and there I saw Mr. Campos's address typed into the phone, and it signified to me that the user of the phone had arrived at Mr. Campos's property.
And what did you do after finding this evidence on Mr. Trimble's phone?
I arrested Mr. Trimble.
Did he say anything to you as you were arresting him?
Yes, ma'am. He said that he was walking his dog that morning.
Detective Abdulahi, was that an accurate statement?
No, ma'am.
How did you know?
I knew this from the Google Maps application on Mr. Trimble's phone, as well as Mr. Trimble later identifying that he was at the property that morning.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Detective Abdulahi.
Good evening.
I want to begin with the timing of your investigation. You were assigned the lead detective on this case at 7 a.m. on June 13, 2024. That's right?
Yes, sir.
And later that same afternoon, you arrested my client. That's true?
Yes, sir.
So just to be clear, from assignment to arrest, you investigated this case, what, 7 to 8 hours maybe?
Yes, sir. I was able to collect evidence and arrest Mr. Trimble.
But that's a yes, you maybe investigated for about 7 to 8 hours?
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about what happened after you arrested my client. You were approached by a man named Tajari Hakika, that's right?
That's right.
Mr. Hakika told you that he overheard a conversation between Lupe Campos and Finn Omali where they were planning to set up my client.
Objection,
That's
Your
right?
Honor. Hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor. These statements are not being offered for the truth of the matter that they assert, but rather to show the lack of subsequent action of the investigator. It was our contention in opening statements and in this case that the police failed to investigate evidence that would have exonerated my client.
Your Honor, there are actually 2 layers of hearsay here. First, that Tajari Hakika's statements to Detective Abdulahi. The second layer of hearsay, which opposing counsel has not addressed, is Finn Omali and Lupe Campos' statements that Tajari is talking about. Both of these are being offered for their truth, and therefore they are hearsay.
All right, so counsel is asserting, for purposes of you responding to her objection, that what I'm hearing you say is that you're not taking issue with counsel's position that this goes to show the impact, thoroughness, or lack of thoroughness on the investigation, but you still continue the layer of hearsay on the conversation, so the declarant being Omali, or being, the declarant being Lupe Campos, that's the level of hearsay that you are still objecting to?
Yes, Your Honor. I would just ask for a limiting instruction on that first layer of hearsay of Tajari Hakika's statements to Detective Abdulahi, but for that second layer of hearsay of Finn Omali and Lupe Campos' conversation, I still believe that is being offered for its truth, Your Honor.
And so, counsel, do you have a response to the argument that the statement made by Lupe Campos constitutes hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor. It's the same response. The statements by Lupe Campos and Finn Omali, which are the only statements of substance that Mr. Hakika told the detective, are being used to show the lack of investigation that we are trying to prove she did not investigate well enough in this case, not for the truth of the matter that they assert. The limiting instruction on Tajari Hakika's statements would not do much for opposing counsel, as he only relayed the statements of Lupe Campos and Finn Omali, which are not being offered for the truth.
Well, I think what counsel is asking for, if I grant her request, is to instruct this jury that the totality of that statement by the defense is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted and is only going to be argued and used to show thoroughness or lack of thoroughness of this investigation. Do you want to assert an exception to this hearsay rule to which that statement may apply, or do you want to accept her limiting instruction?
No, Your Honor, the limiting instruction is perfectly fine, as that's the only thing we contend in this case, is that her investigation was not thorough enough.
All right, and counsel, are you requesting a limiting instruction at this time or at the time that the court reads jury instructions?
Your Honor, the time is both times possible, Your Honor?
Yes?
That is what the state would request.
Okay, I will give a limiting instruction after we hear the statement. Your objection is sustained with a limiting instruction. You may proceed.
May I re-ask the question?
Of course.
Mr. Hakika told you that he had overheard a conversation between Lupe Campos and Finn Omali when they were planning to set up my car. That's correct?
That's right, he said that.
And Mr. Hakika showed you an audio recording in which Lupe Campos supposedly accepted $25,000 in exchange for Finn Omali shooting her. That's correct?
He presented this audio to me, and I did investigate it.
It's your claim that you investigated this audio, and I believe you said on direct examination that it was fake. That's right?
This audio was artificial intelligence. That's right.
Well, you say it's artificial intelligence, but you would agree that it sounded like Lupe Campos, didn't it?
It didn't sound exactly like Mr. Campos's voice. There were similarities, but again, I listened to this audio and I determined that it was artificial intelligence.
Detective, is it your testimony that this did not sound like Lupe Campos?
That's not what I said.
So you would agree with me that it did sound like Lupe Campos?
They had similarities, yes.
It sounded like Lupe Campos. That's true?
It sounded similar to his voice.
Is it your testimony that it only sounded similar to his voice? It didn't sound like Lupe Campos?
It sounded similar to his voice. It had characteristics of Mr. Campos's voice. I agree with you. It had characteristics, but it did not sound exactly like his voice.
I understand you say that there were some speech patterns that might have been off, but in your sworn statement, you said that it sounded like Lupe Campos. That is true.
Yes, and I provided context with the reasons why I believe it was artificial intelligence.
And you would agree that if that audio is authentic, it would exonerate my client, wouldn't it?
If it was authentic, and it's not.
And weeks later, you received Lupe Campos's bank records, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
These bank records, they lined up with what Mr. Hakika told you, didn't they?
There was a $25 transfer there. Yes, that's right.
$25,000 transfer?
Excuse me, $25,000 transfer. That's right.
If you could pull up Exhibit 10 in front of you, I believe it should still be in the stand. And let me know if you don't have a copy.
And members of the jury, while the witness is pulling up Exhibit 10, I'm going to provide you with a limiting instruction. That limiting instruction is any statement that was made, and you have heard testimony related to a conversation that purportedly occurred in Durant, is only being offered by the defense for the purpose of showing thoroughness or lack of thoroughness of the investigation. It is not being offered to prove the truth of the content of the statement. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. This bank record shows a $25,000 deposit into Lupe Campos's account 1 day after the shooting happened. That's correct?
I see that. Yes.
Now, this audio recording that Mr. Hakika showed you, it told about Lupe Campos receiving $25,000 from Finn Omali, and you would agree that this bank record shows $25,000 from Huckleberry Finn LLC. That's right?
That's right. It's my understanding that Finn Omali, his name is not Huckleberry Finn, but yes, that's what it says here.
Well, I want to talk about that. you didn't investigate this Huckleberry Finn LLC any further, did you?
I did not.
You didn't subpoena the originating corporation?
I did not.
You didn't subpoena Finn O'Malley to see if he had any connection to this?
I investigated Mr. O'Malley, but I did not subpoena him, no.
You didn't investigate if he had any connection to Huckleberry Finn LLC, that's right?
No, I did not.
The truth, detective, is that Lupe Campos was being suspicious the entirety of your investigation. Isn't that true?
I wouldn't necessarily say he was being suspicious. He wanted to stay outside of his home, and that was his comfortability, and so I investigated him there.
Well, isn't it true that Lupe Campos lied to you about knowing Finn O'Malley?
That's right. He said that he knew him from previous times.
In your experience as a detective, lying is indicative of guilt.
Objection, Your Honor. This invades the province of the jury.
Would you like to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm a little confused as to exactly what opposing counsel is objecting to.
I'll let you respond. Go ahead.
Your Honor, asking the witness to say that lying is directly indicative of guilt is invading the province of the jury as, one, the jury is the sole decider of any witness's credibility in today's case, and two, the jury is the trier of fact today. They are the one that gets to decide guilt and innocence, not Detective Abdulahi.
Counsel?
Your Honor, that is exactly true. Only the jury has the end-all be-all decision as to whether or not Hollis Trimble is innocent or guilty. But that is the trier of fact, or that is the fact that is being determined in this case. It is Hollis Trimble's guilt or innocence, not Lupe Campos's. So whether or not lying is indicative of guilt in her experience as a detective with Lupe Campos's lies has no bearing on what the jury is deciding with Hollis Trimble in this case.
Then why are you offering it?
To show that if Lupe Campos was lying, that they could have been more likely to have been in a setup against my client or not telling the truth when they were testifying on the stand. It's attacking the witness's credibility, Your Honor.
Sustained. Sustained.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, Lupe Campos also admitted to you that they disabled their doorbell camera after the shooting. That's right?
I wouldn't say that he disabled the doorbell camera. He got rid of it. That's what I heard.
He got rid of the camera.
Right, after I listened to it and factored it into my investigation.
And when you asked to search Lupe Campos's home, he refused, didn't he?
That's right.
And this article that Lupe Campos was supposedly writing, you've never seen that article, have you?
That's right. The article wasn't of high priority in my investigation.
You do not know if the existence of that article is a lie, do you?
Of course not. That wasn't part of my investigation.
You can't tell this jury if that article is simply a plan to lure my client to Lupe Campos's house for a setup. You can't say that for certain, can you?
That was not part of my investigation.
That's right. That was not a part of your investigation. I'm hearing that correctly?
That's right. I did a thorough investigation of what needed to be done to identify who is the shooter.
Thank you, Detective. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel asked you some questions about Mr. Campos's article. Can you explain to the jury why this wasn't important to your investigation?
When I was investigating Mr. Campos wasn't the shooter. I was investigating Mr. Trimble as the shooter, and so what Mr. Campos was writing wouldn't lead me towards the direction of who shot that firearm that morning.
And can you also tell the jury why you didn't believe that Finn O'Malley was involved in your investigation?
I investigated Finn O'Malley, and after that, I did not proceed further with investigating him. It was unimportant at that time.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No recross, Your Honor.
All right, sorry, recross. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Your Honor, may I approach the bench or approach the witness stand to retrieve our exhibits?
Yeah, actually, why don't you just take them to her on your way out? Do you rest?
Yes, Your Honor. This time the state rests.
Okay. Defense, your first witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Mr. Tajari Hakika.
And Mr. Hakika, you are still under oath. Please be seated to my right.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening, Mr. Hakika.
Evening to you too, sir.
Please state your full name for the record.
Sure, yeah. It's Tajari Hakika, but you know, most folks just call me TJ.
Tell the jury a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How old are you?
Of course, yeah. I'm 27 years old, and I'm a Southie. You know, growing up in South Boston and all that, but I've lived all over.
What do you do for a living?
I guess you could say I'm a gopher. You know, for Mr. Trimble over there. So when he asks, I'll go for stuff. I'll go for coffee, or go for bagels, go for information. Kind of an errand boy, I guess you could say.
How long have you worked for Mr. Trimble?
About a year or so, 15 months to be exact.
And just for full disclosure, are you related to Mr. Trimble?
Me and Mr. Trimble I did like a 23andMe DNA test, you know, that DNA company that just went out of business, and it told us they're cousins. So, you know, who knows?
And where do you live now?
Now I live at Hollis's place, 2002 East Missouri, right here in Phoenix.
Do you know a person by the name of Finn O'Malley?
Sure, yeah. I know Finn. You know, Finn, he started researching at Hollis's office before I got here to Phoenix. And, you know, after that, I started to run Hollins for Mr. Trimble over there. But in addition to that, I'd get stuff for Finn while he was working at Hollis's office. Breakfast, things like that. And then eventually, Hollis asked me to keep an eye on Mr. Omali. And so that's what I did.
Do you know a person by the name of Lupe Campos?
Sure. You know, I know what Mr. Campos looks like, know what his voice sounds like. The two of us, we've never been introduced formally, but I know who he is.
How is it then that you can recognize Mr. Campos's voice?
Well, it's on account of, like I was saying earlier, I was in charge of watching Finn, right? And so I overheard a couple of meetings between Mr. Finn and Mr. Campos.
I want to turn our attention to June 9th of last year. Finn O'Malley testified that he met with Lupe Campos at Durant's restaurant on June 9th of last year. Do you have any knowledge about this meeting?
Well, yes, sir. I was there.
What do you know about this meeting?
Well, I sure know what the two of them said to each other.
And how do you know about this meeting?
Well, you know, it's like I was saying earlier. You know, Hollis, he told me to follow Finn everywhere, all over. And so on that day, June 9th that is, I followed Finn from his house to Durant's restaurant. And you know, Finn, he goes and gets a booth, and so I asked the hostess for a booth right next to his. Just as I'm sitting down at that booth there, I see Finn walk in and I see Lupe walk down and sit down with Finn.
From what you saw and heard, do you recall any indication that either of them recognized that you were there?
No, sir. Nothing like that.
Do you recall what they were talking about?
Ah, jeez. I mean, I don't think I'll ever forget what they was saying. They was trying to set up Mr. Trimble over there.
Your Honor, I would just like the court to renew its limiting instruction that the defense agreed to in the previous, with the previous witness.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I believe Mr. O'Malley or Mr. Hakika has not testified to any statements, and any statements Mr. Hakika will testify to will fall as an exception to Rule 8033. Lupe Campos and Finn O'Malley's then existing state of mind as a plan and emotion.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
May.
Your Honor, I would just like to reiterate, the court has already decided on the situation, and when given the opportunity to use a hearsay exception or a carve-out under 801, the defense chose this limiting instruction that the conversation at the Durant's restaurant should not be taken for its truthfulness or for the truth of the matter, but rather solely to attack Detective Abdullahi's investigation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
I believe Mr. Royer was under the impression that he was going to use these statements to attack the credibility of Detective Abdullahi's investigation, so he agreed to that limiting instruction in that case. I'd request that that limiting instruction doesn't apply to these statements because the hearsay exception does apply in this case.
Would you like to substantively respond to the assertion that this statement, that I anticipate the witness is going to be testifying to or attempting to testify to falls under 8033.
Yes, Your Honor, I do believe that these statements fall under 8033 as statements of intent or plan. However, I'm simply asking the court to renew its limiting instruction that the defense has agreed to already.
All right, overruled. The court does recognize that this particular statement does qualify under an exception to the hearsay rule under 8033. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hakika, you were just mentioning how Lupe Campos and Finn Omali were planning to set up Hollis Trimble. Did they explain how they were going to set up Hollis Trimble?
They sure did. So Finn Finn outright says this. He says, you call Hollis and leave him a message saying that you are going to expose his connection to the Don Bowles murder. Then leave him information on where you're going to be. When Hollis gets there, I'll be hiding nearby, and I'll shoot at him with the same type of gun that Hollis has. Then you call the cops and tell them that Hollis tried to kill you. He'll go to prison, you can publish your article, I can publish my book, and we can both make a fortune.
Did you hear anything else in this conversation?
Well, sure, yeah. I heard what Lupe said in response. And at this point, I knew it was real important, so I pull out my phone, right? And I go ahead and I record what he says.
What did Mr. Campos say?
Well, he says this. He says, I agree to have you shoot at me at my house for $25,000 to frame Hollis Trimble.
Did you go to the police with this information?
I did eventually, but not at first.
Why not?
Well, you see, it's like this. Back when I lived in Nashville, I used to be a cop, right? And one of the things that I learned as a cop is that you gotta catch him in the act, It's not the talking about it that sends him to the slammer, it's the doing.
So, what did you do to catch them in the act?
Well, I was planning to go with Hollis to Lupe's house that morning, but then I go and I overslept my alarm, and so I wasn't able to catch him in the act.
So, when did you end up telling the police this information?
I told them shortly after Hollis got arrested, the same day. I call up the cops and I told them everything that I knew about the setup, about the meeting between Lupe and Finn, all of that.
Did Detective Abdulahi take your statement?
Well, no, sir, not that I know of.
Did you provide Detective Abdulahi with the recording you had from the meeting between Finn Omali and Lupe Campos on June 9th?
Well, I sure tried to give it to her. We met together, and I played the recording for her, but then she just goes and she calls it a fake after one listen, just like she did here today. But it's not a fake. So that's when I went out and I got an expert to prove to everybody that it's the real thing. Legit.
And what was the name of that expert?
His name is Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Hakika. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Hakika.
Evening to you, too.
Now, on direct examination, I'd like to talk about June 8th of 2024. On June 8th, you witnessed a conversation between Finn Omali and the defendant, is that right?
Yes, sir, I did.
And during this conversation, the defendant told Finn Omali to publish a book naming Charlie Allen as the killer of Don Bowles.
Yes, sir.
And when he said this, the defendant had his hand on his gun, is that right?
Yes, sir, he did.
Now, after Finn had left, the defendant told you to follow him.
That's what he said, yes.
And he said that you would be rewarded if you could help get Finn Omali out of the picture.
He did. At this point, I was working for Mr. Trimble, and so it became a part of my job.
And this was after Mr. Trimble had discovered that Finn was going to publish his book naming him as the killer.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So that's when you started to follow Finn.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'd like to talk about what you talked about on direct examination, the meeting at Durant's. You followed Finn to Durant's.
Yes, sir, from his house.
And Lupe was
Lupe arrived shortly after I got there and went into the booth right next to Finn's.
And like you said on direct, no one can testify that you were there.
No one can testify that I was there. The two of them, they did not see me. I was very discreet.
No one can testify that you were at Durant's on June 9th.
Well, no one except me.
And during this, you only recorded one sentence.
I recorded the one sentence of Lupe talking to Finn, responding to the whole paragraph about, trying to set Hollis up.
Recorded one sentence.
Yes, sir.
And the sentence was, I agree to have you shoot at me at my home for $25,000 to frame Hollis Trimble.
That's right.
That one sentence.
That's right. There were some pauses in there, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
And you showed this to Detective Abdulahi.
Yes, sir. We arranged the meeting after I called the cops and told them everything I knew about the meeting. And so we met about 4 days after the arrest of Mr. Trimble.
Right, you didn't tell them until 4 days later, did you?
No, sir.
Because like you said on direct, you wanted to catch them in the act.
Yes, sir. I wanted to
You never
catch...
did catch them in the act, did you?
No, sir. Like I was saying, I went and I overslept my alarm. So I wasn't able to catch him in the act. And believe me, I regret that.
Mr. Hakika, you were the only one that overheard the supposed conversation at Durant's.
Yes, sir. That's what I said earlier.
And you never caught them in the act.
No, sir. Like I've just been saying, I went and overslept my alarm, and so I wasn't able to catch him in the act. But I sure tried to.
Now, I'd like to talk about another conversation you overheard. You overheard one at the Clarendon Hotel, is that right?
Yes, sir. That was on June 2nd.
And during both the Durant's and the Clarendon Hotel conversation, you had some listening equipment, is that right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And you also had your phone.
Yes, sir.
Your phone which you used to record.
In the June 9th meeting, not the June 2nd meeting.
You had the device that you used to record in both meetings. Am I right or am I wrong?
The device that I recorded with being my phone, but I did not use that in the first meeting.
Am I right or am I wrong, Mr. Hakika?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
The device you used to record in both meetings between Lupe and Finn Omali.
Yes, sir. You're right. I had my phone at both meetings.
Now, Mr. Hakika, I'd like to bring your attention to June 12th. On June 12th, you're aware that the defendant received a phone call from Mr. Campos, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And after this phone call, the defendant was yelling, wasn't he?
Yes, sir. He sure didn't look happy.
He didn't look happy, he was yelling, and he said, if Lupe publishes that article, I'll lose everything and go to prison for the rest of my life. Did I correctly quote the defendant?
You did. And of course, that makes sense on account of...
And that's when the defendant...
Objection. I ask that Mr. Hakika be able to explain his answers before opposing counsel cuts him off.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I believe the question, did I correctly quote the defendant, does not need an explanation beyond yes or no.
You are correct. Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, if you can answer the question with a yes or no, please do.
Of course.
And after the defendant said that is when he decided to go to Lupe Campos' home the next day.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
The next day being June 13th.
Next day being June 13th. That's right.
June 13th, the day Lupe Campos was shot.
Yes, sir.
Now, let's talk about the next day. The next day, like you said, you overslept and you eventually woke up at 7 a.m., didn't you?
Yes, sir. About an hour after I was supposed to wake up.
And at 7 a.m., you went downstairs and you saw the defendant.
That's right.
And the defendant said to you, I'm in trouble. Big, big, life-ending kind of trouble. Did I correctly quote the defendant?
Yes, sir. You did.
And that's when you responded that you would do anything to help him.
That's what I said. He's my cousin, he's my boss, and so I told him I'm helping him out.
More than that, keeping him out of prison meant securing your place in the will, didn't it?
It did.
And then 4 days later is when you showed Detective Abdulahi the alleged audio recording.
Well, I told him about the audio recording on that day, but I showed it to him 4 days later.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hakika, I want to clarify for the jury, when did you tell Detective Abdulahi about that one sentence recording?
That would have been June 13th, the day Lupe got shot and the day Hollis got arrested.
On that June 13th, the day Lupe Campos was shot, did the detective, to the best of your knowledge, do any testing on that one sentence to determine whether it was a real or fake audio?
No, sir. All he did was he played it once, and then he just went and called it a fake.
Thank you, Mr. Hakika. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any further questions?
No recross, Your Honor.
You may step down. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls George Beck.
The witness would be seated to my right. A reminder, you are still under oath. You may proceed when you're ready, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Beck.
Good evening.
Will you please state your full name for the record?
George Beck.
Where are you from?
I was born and raised in West London, Fulham to be precise, but I moved stateside after secondary school for a job at Google. And, well, I never left.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a computer scientist. For the past 6 years, I've worked as an independent consultant and researcher in the AI space.
What do you mean when you say AI?
AI stands for artificial intelligence. It refers to the ability of computers to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, things such as learning, reasoning, and problem solving.
Does your AI research focus on anything specific?
Indeed. My work focuses on detecting AI-generated audio. What that means is I research how to distinguish between authentic audio and computer-generated audio.
Why is this important?
Well, even though AI is a very powerful tool that can be used for immense good, it can unfortunately also be used for evil. It has become increasingly common for scammers to use computer-generated audios to trick people or mislead the public. So, my work aims to combat this problem by making it easy for anyone to identify fake audio.
Let's turn to why we're in court today, Mr. Beck. How are you involved in this case?
I was hired to evaluate an audio recording to determine whether it was an authentic recording of a man named Lupe Campos or a computer-generated fake.
Before we dive into your analysis of the authenticity of that recording, I'd like the jury to hear about your credentials. You mentioned that you moved to the U.S. to work for Google. Tell us about your experience in artificial intelligence.
I spent 5 years as an executive for Google's DeepMind project, which is the name of Google's AI research laboratory. After my time at Google, I've worked, as I mentioned before, as an independent consultant in the AI space for the last 6 years.
Have you ever provided your expert opinion in legal cases like this one?
I have. I've provided my analysis in multiple cases involving audio authenticity.
Have any scholarly journals published your AI research?
Indeed. My work in AI audio detection has been published by the Journal of Digital Forensics, AI and Cybersecurity Review, and the Journal of AI and Ethics, amongst others.
Mr. Beck, let's turn to your work in this case. You mentioned that you were hired to evaluate the authenticity of a recording of Lupe Campos. Did you have sufficient facts and data to reach a conclusion?
Indeed. The audio recording that I evaluated was short, only 17 words, but there was sufficient audio to determine whether it was AI-generated or not.
Did you apply reliable principles and methods for reaching that conclusion?
Of course. I used a 3-step process that you can remember with the acronym ADD. ADD. It stands for Artifact Detection, Diction Analysis, and Detection Modeling. The ADD technique allows one to determine whether artificial intelligence has added anything to, or even created an audio recording.
Did you reach your conclusion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
I did.
What did you conclude, Mr. Beck?
I concluded that the audio recording of Mr. Campos, wherein he agreed to accept $25,000 in exchange for being shot, was an authentic recording of Mr. Campos and was not AI generated.
What led you to that conclusion?
Well, it was that three-step process that I mentioned earlier. Add. Each of the three steps, artifact detection, diction analysis, and detection modeling, pointed to authentic audio, not computer-generated audio.
Let's take each of those steps one at a time. The first thing you mentioned was artifact detection. Can you tell us what that means?
Yes, I suppose I should explain the concept of artifacts. In audio, an artifact refers to the unwanted or accidental distortions of audio caused by a computer when it generates or edits that audio. Just as an artifact found at an archaeological dig was created and left behind by humans, artifacts in audio are sounds created and left behind by computers.
Can you give us an example of what an artifact might include?
Certainly. In computer-generated audio, there is often a humming or buzzing noise, for example.
When you listened to the recording of Lupe Campos in this case, did you detect any artifacts?
No, I did not. While there was a very slight humming noise, based on my experience, that was, pardon me, that was not an artifact. This hum sounded more like an environmental noise, like a background sound, than it did the sound a computer creates when it compresses audio.
Let's turn to the second step of your three-step process, Mr. Beck. What is diction analysis?
Diction analysis is just a fancy way of saying you evaluate the way the speaker speaks. Pardon me. Diction, things like diction, syntax, word choice, breathing patterns.
What exactly are you listening for when conducting a diction analysis?
Computer-generated audio often uses unnatural word choice or unnatural breathing patterns.
What was the result of your diction analysis in this case?
Well, the speech patterns all sounded normal. Mr. Campos could be heard saying, "I agreed to have you shoot at me at my home for $25,000. Normal breathing patterns, normal word choice.
Finally, Mr. Beck, the last step of your ad process was detection modeling. What does that mean?
I wrote a piece of software that leverages machine learning to evaluate audio. You feed it an audio file, and it will detect whether it is AI generated or not.
How does this software work?
It leverages machine learning.
I heard you say that before, Mr. Beck, but can you explain to us what that means, like we're not computer scientists?
Of course. Machine learning, simply put, means that instead of following strict rules, a piece of software will actually adapt over time based on inputs it has received previously, which is to say, it learns. So I wrote a software designed to look for patterns in audio. I then fed that software thousands and thousands of audio samples, and each time told it whether it was authentic or fake. Over time, the software starts to identify patterns associated with each. And now, when fed an audio file, it can accurately determine whether it is authentic or AI generated with a nearly 99% confidence level.
Did you feed the recording of Lupe Campos into your detection model?
I did.
What was the result?
The model determined that it was an authentic recording of Mr. Campos, which of course is consistent with what I had concluded on the first two steps of the ad technique. Bottom line, the ad technique returned negative. The audio was authentic, not computer generated.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Beck, you've actually never testified in a trial before, have you?
No, ma'am, I have not. I've been consulted in the past, but not testified.
Well, in your very first trial ever testifying, you actually know the defendant, don't you?
That's right.
You met Trimble a few years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, you and the defendant used to be shooting buddies, isn't that right?
Correct, yes.
So you know that the defendant owns many kinds of guns, don't you?
That's right. I don't know exactly the make or model, but yes, that's right.
I want to talk about the AI model that you mentioned on direct examination. Now, you made this AI model yourself, didn't you?
That's right.
Nobody else has tested your model.
No, ma'am, they have not.
Nobody else has used your model.
No, ma'am, it's waiting for the patent.
So you're the only one who's ever tested it,
That's right.
and you're the only one who's ever used it.
That's right, it's soon to be patented.
You trained this model on audios from TikTok, Mr. Beck.
Right, audio samples from the internet.
You trained this model on audios from YouTube.
Right, amongst other sources on the internet.
Well, you never verified if the audios from TikTok were authentic.
I only fed my software authentic audios.
You never verified if the audios that you fed into your model were authentic.
Like I said earlier, only fed it authentic audio. That would defeat the purpose of training the software.
But Mr. Beck, you never clarified if those audios were authentic before you fed them into your model.
They were authentic.
Is it your testimony today that you did verify if these audios were authentic?
I'm saying that there would be no reason to feed my software computer-generated audios. That would mistake the training purpose.
But you never checked to make sure that they weren't computer-generated.
I'm telling you they were authentic.
You never checked to verify if they were authentic.
That's incorrect. They were authentic audios.
Mr. Beck, is it your testimony that you verified that they were authentic audios?
It's my testimony that the audio files I fed to my software were authentic when I trained them.
Mr. Beck, I'd like to move on. You were here today when Tajari Hakika testified.
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Hakika testified that he was at the Clarendon Hotel on June 2nd.
I believe he said that. I'm not so sure as to exactly what he said, but I believe
He
so.
testified that he heard Mr. Campos's entire conversation on June 2nd.
That might have been what he said, yes.
Hakika also testified that he was at Durant's on June 9th.
That's right, yes.
Hakika testified that he heard Mr. Campos's entire conversation on June 9th.
That's right, yes, ma'am.
You would say that you need sufficient audio recordings in order to create a deepfake.
That's right, yes.
And you heard Tajari Hakika testify that with both of these conversations, he had recording equipment. Isn't that right?
He did say that, yes.
Moving on, we can agree that when AI is generating an audio, you would hear humming in the background. Isn't that right?
That's right, that's indicative of what we call an artifact.
Well, when you began listening to Mr. Hakika's audio recording, you heard humming, didn't you?
That's right, a very slight humming.
Well, it gave you so much concern that you ended up calling Tajari Hakika. Isn't that right?
That's right. I consulted Mr. Hakika on the origins of that humming noise, which corroborated what I believed as it was an environmental sound.
Well, let's talk about something Mr. Hakika also said. Mr. Hakika also said that if you didn't find the recording to be authentic, he wouldn't pay you. Isn't that right?
He did say that, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Beck, you were just asked about Mr. Hakika's threat not to pay you. I'm going to ask you something uncomfortable. My grandmother told me never to ask about money or politics, but, sir, do you know your net worth?
I do, yes.
Do you mind telling that to the jury?
It's $45 million.
Mr. Beck, would you ever let a payment of $30,000 supersede your reputation in this case?
Of course not, no.
And does your AI model have a function that detects money?
No, sir. My software works by feeding it an audio file, and it will determine whether it is authentic or AI generated. There is no monetary input.
Mr. Beck, you were also asked about your not explaining your model to other experts in your field. Can you briefly explain why you haven't given your model to other experts to test?
Indeed, because I've not yet received my patent protection. If I were to give them the software without that protection, they could steal my life's work.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Hollis Trimble.
Mr. Trimble, if you would please take the stand to my right. Just a reminder, sir, you are under oath. You may proceed whenever you're ready and your witness has taken the stand.
Yes, sir. Please tell the jury your name.
My name is Hollis Trimble.
Are you the defendant in this case?
Yes, I am.
How old are you, Mr. Trimble?
I'm 72 years old.
Have you waived your constitutional rights and agreed to testify subject to cross-examination?
Yes, I have absolutely nothing to hide from this jury.
I'd like to cut right to the chase. Did you fire a gun at Lupe Campos on June 13th, 2024?
No, sir. I most definitely did not.
Were you present at the scene when a shot was fired?
Yes, sir. I was there. I was in my pickup truck at Lupe's house when someone else shot at Lupe. It was not me.
When Detective Abdulahi asked you about your whereabouts that morning, did you lie to the detective?
Sir, I'm really not proud of myself for this one. But yes, I told that detective that I'd been outside walking my dog, Mr. Pickles. It was real silly of me, sir, I know. And it wasn't true. I'll own up to that. But again, I did not shoot Lupe.
Mr. Trimble, I want the jury to know a little bit more about you. Where are you from?
Well, sir, I was born in Miami, Arizona, a little town up in the mountains, pretty much due east of here, out on Highway 60. My father and his father grew up working the copper mines there, up until my daddy was killed in a mining accident, crushed by a piece of equipment. Rest his soul. Anyways, I decided that's not what I wanted for my life, so I moved to Phoenix. That would have been in the early 70s.
What was your occupation when you moved to Phoenix?
Well, my daddy made his living with what was under the ground, so I made my living with the ground itself. I got into real estate. I also started a podcast a few years back.
Mr. Trimble, I want to go back and talk about June 13th of last year. You told us earlier that you were parked across the street from the victim's home. Is that true?
Oh, no, sir. I was parked in Lupe's driveway.
Just to be clear, why were you parked in Lupe's driveway?
Lupe had asked me to be there, sir. It's sort of like he said earlier on this stand. He was going to leave his house at 6 a.m. To go ahead and publish that article saying that I had something to do with the Don Bowles murder case. And he asked me to be there to give a statement. And so I did just like he asked.
Mr. Trimble, what happened when you first arrived?
Well, I saw Lupe come out of his home, and so I yelled out of my window to let him know that I was there.
What did you yell?
I yelled, "Hey you, that article, publish it and regret it." I wanted him to know that if he went on and published that article saying that I had something to do with the Don Bowles murder case, that I was going to go ahead and sue for defamation on account of there was nothing true about it. Nothing at all. And so I told him that he would regret it.
Now, Mr. Trimble, when you said publish it and regret it, were you warning the victim that you were going to shoot at him?
No, sir. I was saying that I was fixing to sue him, not shoot him. What they're saying, it don't make any sense. I was saying that I was going to sue Lupe for defamation if he published that article. Why would I warn Lupe about go ahead and publishing that article if I was just fixing to shoot him regardless? Don't make any sense to me, sir.
Mr. Campos testified earlier that Mr. Campos has testified earlier that when you yelled, publish it and regret it, there was then a scream. Do you know what that scream was?
I know exactly what it was, sir. I was getting out of my truck so Lupe and I could talk. That's what he asked me there to do, and that's what I was fixing to do. But I got that sciatica, that nerve pain, sir. It's real bad. Of course, that flared right up as I was getting out of my truck, and I'm here to tell y'all I must have yelped like a stepped-on kitten or something of the sort, and I'm sure that's the yell that he heard.
After this yell, what happened at that point?
That's when I heard a shot, sir.
Where did this shot come from?
Somewhere from behind my truck.
Would that be across the street?
I suppose across the street would be behind my truck, sir. Truth be told, I didn't really stick around to find out. For all I know, I was the one being shot at, and so I didn't really gauge who was where.
So what did you do, Mr. Trimble?
Well, sir, I'd like to think that I know a thing or two about a thing or two, and one thing I know is that if someone's shooting in your direction, you got to get out of the way. So I slammed my door to, and I hit the gas.
Thank you, Mr. Trimble. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. On direct examination, Mr. Trimble, you talked about your location when you arrived at Mr. Campos' house. Is it your testimony today that you parked in his driveway?
Yes, ma'am. I went to Lupe's house, and that's where I parked.
So it's your testimony today that you parked in his driveway?
That's right, ma'am. I drove to his house.
Not that you drove to his house, but you specifically parked in his driveway. Is that your testimony today?
That's what it means to drive to someone's house. Yes, ma'am.
Prior to coming to court today, you made a statement.
Yes, ma'am. A sworn one.
Statement under oath, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
A statement under, this is the same oath that you are under today.
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
A statement under oath means that you tell the truth.
Certainly.
And you did tell the truth.
Yes, ma'am.
And a statement under oath also means that you don't leave out any material facts.
I suppose so. Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't leave out any material facts.
No, ma'am.
And now approaching opposing counsel with the witnesses sworn affidavit. May I approach the witness with a sworn affidavit?
You may.
And now handing the witness sworn affidavit. Now your affidavit is open to lines to page 41, and I'm going to direct you to paragraph 26, line 199 to 200. Just read silently as I read aloud. I got in my pickup truck and drove over to their house early the next morning. I had Stella, but I always carry her. It's my constitutional right. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, ma'am. It's just like I said. I drove to his house.
So we can agree that nowhere in your statement it says that you parked in Mr. Campos' driveway.
No, ma'am. I said I drove to his house. That's what that means.
You did not put in your statement that you parked in his driveway. Am I right or am I wrong?
I didn't put those words, ma'am. I said I drove to his house.
So we can agree that you did not put the words that you parked in his driveway, correct?
Correct, ma'am. I said I drove over to their house early the next morning.
Objection, Your Honor. Withdraw. May I retrieve the witness's sworn?
You may.
All right, now, Mr. Trimble, we can agree that you're very knowledgeable about the murder of Don Bowles, correct?
Thank you, ma'am.
We can agree.
Yes, ma'am.
You've studied this case for most of your life.
I have.
And you were actually about 23 when the murder actually happened, correct?
I believe you're right at this point, ma'am.
And at that age, you knew everyone that Don Bowles was investigating.
I like to think so, yes, ma'am.
And you even worked with some of these people.
I did.
These people that you worked with, they had connections to the mafia, didn't they?
I don't know anything about mafia connections, ma'am.
Well, in your sworn affidavit that you refreshed yesterday, you said that you would label the people you worked with as mafia dirty, correct?
Not when I worked with them, ma'am. I guess you could use that label. That has
You
mouth.
used that label in your sworn affidavit, didn't you?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Those are from different business dealings.
All right, and back then, you were willing
Certainly.
And you were willing to do anything to become rich and successful.
Yes, ma'am. I was willing to work as hard as it took.
All right, now I want to move your attention to Mr. Finn O'Malley. You met Mr. O'Malley in the summer of 2023.
That's correct.
And he came to you wanting help with his research of the Don Bulls case.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
And you decided to help Mr. O'Malley. You decided to mentor him.
Yes, ma'am. He was rather lost, if I may.
Well, as you were mentoring him, he would come up with different suspects about who killed Don Bulls.
That's right, ma'am. He got caught up in what I like to call the Bulls fever, getting too caught up in all the rabbit holes to do with that case instead of focusing on the real, bigger picture.
And you dismissed all the suspects that Mr. O'Malley presented to you.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, Bulls fever, it's happened to a lot of folks.
And an accusation like this, we can agree, could be reputation ending.
I don't know about that, ma'am. I'm not sure.
Well, you plan to sue Lupe Campos for hurting your reputation, and he gave you these accusations, didn't he?
Well, yes, ma'am. It's not true.
So we can agree that being faced with an accusation like this could be reputation ending.
Well, that depends, ma'am.
Well, it could have been reputation ending for you.
It could have been, yes, ma'am. I wasn't willing to find out. So, yes, I was going to sue him.
After dismissing suspect after suspect of Finn O'Malley's, you then decided to tell Mr. O'Malley who you believed had done it.
That's right, ma'am. Charles Allen.
Yes, you told him Charlie Allen did it. That's it. End of story.
Yes, ma'am. Again, I was trying to save him from that Bulls fever.
All right, well, let's talk about how confident you are in what you told Mr. O'Malley. Over your years of studies, you have only hunches about who killed Don Bulls.
That's right, ma'am.
So you have no proof that Charlie Allen killed Don Bulls?
Just hunches, ma'am. You're right.
You have no proof to support this reputation-ending accusation.
No concrete proof. You're right, ma'am. Just hunches.
Because you have no concrete proof about Allen, you never went to the police about it.
No, ma'am. Of course not.
Because you have no concrete proof about Allen, you never talked about him as a suspect on your podcast.
No, ma'am. That could get me into some legal trouble.
Because you have no concrete proof about Allen, you never decided you wanted to publish a book saying Allen was the killer.
Again, ma'am, I don't know too much about the law, but I know that wouldn't be good for me or my podcast.
But despite having no concrete proof and thinking that it would get you in trouble with the law, you told your mentee, Finn O'Malley, to publish a book saying Charlie Allen killed Don Bulls. Didn't you?
I did tell him that, yes, ma'am. That was his best shot at any kind of investigation. See all those other rabbit holes he had gone down and led to
Mr. Trimble,
nothing.
we can agree that you later found out that Mr. O'Malley wasn't writing this book, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
He was writing a book saying that you killed Don Bulls.
Yes, ma'am. I heard about that.
Yes, and you heard about this through your cousin, Tajari Hakika.
That's correct.
And he told you about a conversation between Finn O'Malley and Lupe Campos.
That's correct.
He told you that Finn O'Malley was telling Lupe Campos that you were involved in the murder of Don Bulls.
He did.
Now, after you heard about this conversation, Mr. Trimble, you were angry.
Well, yes, ma'am. I was frustrated. I couldn't believe someone was so willingly spreading lies about my character like that.
You were angry enough to call the police on Mr. O'Malley.
That's right.
So you filed a false report with the Phoenix Police Department.
I was not fully honest about that, ma'am. You're right. And I'm just as ashamed about that mistake as the one I told the detective. That was a lie.
This false report had Mr. O'Malley arrested for attempted arson.
I believe it did, yes, ma'am.
And you weren't sorry at all that you had Mr. O'Malley arrested.
Well, that's right, ma'am. I believe that grounds of the charge were sustained, although I didn't
I'm
include.
not asking about the grounds of the charge. I'm asking about whether or not you were sorry that you had Mr. O'Malley arrested, and you weren't.
No, ma'am, and for that reason. I just didn't tell them about some
And
of
we can agree that while
Pardon me?
Mr. O'Malley was in prison, he couldn't investigate your involvement in the Don Bulls murder.
I'm not sure, ma'am. Maybe not.
All right, now I want to move your attention to June 12th, the night before the shooting. That's when you got a call from Mr. Lupe Campos.
That's right.
And he told you about his article with your involvement in the Don Bulls murder.
Yes, he did.
And he told you where and when you could meet him the next day.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
And after receiving this call, you then thought about what you were going to do in response, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, you stewed all night over this, didn't you?
I did. I thought about it before I went to bed that night and about how I couldn't believe, really,
You
ma'am.
didn't just think about it before you went to bed. You thought about it all night, didn't you?
You know what I mean, ma'am. I thought about it until I went to bed, and I thought about it all night.
Well, after thinking all night, you then decided not to call Mr. Campos back.
Yes, ma'am. He reached me at the wrong time.
After thinking all night, you then decided to get into your truck the next morning.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Campos had asked me over to his house that morning, so I
After
obliged.
thinking all night, you then decided to drive straight to Mr. Campos' house.
As per his request, yes, ma'am.
Thinking all night, you decided to bring your gun with you.
Well, if I left the house, Stella, my silver revolver beauty, must have been with me, yes, ma'am. She comes with me everywhere I go.
And on direct examination, you talked about hearing a gunshot when you were at Mr. Campos' house. I want to talk about what you did after you heard this gunshot. You didn't look around for a shooter.
No, ma'am. I was more concerned with making sure I didn't get hit.
You didn't check to see if anyone around you had been hit.
No, ma'am. Like I said, I wasn't going to...
After hearing this gunshot,
Objection, Your Honor. I asked that the witness be allowed to explain his answer at least a little bit before opposing counsel cuts him off.
So, sir, if the question is asked in a way that you can answer it yes or no, answer it yes or no. Overruled.
Yes, sir.
after hearing this gunshot, you didn't even call the police.
No, ma'am.
But you later spoke to the police.
At some point in the future, yes, ma'am. That's right.
And when you spoke to Detective Abdulahi, you lied to her about your whereabouts that morning at 6 a.m.
Yes, ma'am. And I regret that.
And you only came clean to the detective after she showed you hard evidence that disproved your lie.
That's right, ma'am. She knew what was going on, and I knew that then.
And because she knew what was going on, you were arrested, correct?
I know that she arrested me, ma'am. I'm not so sure what she knew.
Well, you just testified that she knew what was going on.
Well, she knew that I wasn't walking my dog. That's what I meant, ma'am.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
And Your Honor, the defense rests.
Thank you. Is the state prepared for closing?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll let Mr. Trimble make his way about the well first.
Of course. Is the defense prepared for closing?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready.
All right.
A man with connections. Hollis Trimble is a man with connections. Connections to corrupted people. Connections to the murder of victims. Connections that were all about to be made public. And as the evidence has shown today, Hollis Trimble wanted to conceal these connections. Conceal them from the attempted murder of Lupe Campos. Today, we the state have the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Hollis Trimble attempted murder in the first degree. In order to meet our burden, we have shown you three things. We've shown you Hollis Trimble's intention, his objective on the morning of the 13th. We've shown you his premeditation, and we've shown you his attempt, the action he took in furtherance of his objective. So let's break down these elements, starting with Hollis Trimble's intention, his objective on the morning of the 13th. Under the jury instructions, we must prove that the defendant knew that his conduct would cause the death of Lupe Campos. As you have heard today, when Hollis Trimble woke up that morning, he had an objective. When he got into his car, he had an objective. When he picked up his gun, he had an objective. When he drove straight to Mr. Campos' house, he had an objective. And members of the jury, when he pointed his gun at Lupe Campos, his objective became clear. He wanted to kill Lupe Campos. And the defendant pulled that trigger to protect his reputation. A reputation that, I remind you, members of the jury, had been threatened before. Threatened by Mr. Finn O'Malley's investigation. Well, in order to silence Finn O'Malley, the defendant used what he had learned from his connections. Well, he had Finn O'Malley stalked, jailed. You even heard how he threatened his life. But for the threat that Lupe Campos posed to the defendant's reputation, Hollis Trimble had limited time. Limited time to use his connections, limited time to weave a solution, limited time to tie up loose ends. All the defendant had was one night. But one night proved to be enough for Hollis Trimble, which leads me to the second element of premeditation. Under the jury instructions, we must prove that the defendant reflected on his decision before acting. Well, you heard the defendant himself tell you that after he got that call from Mr. Campos, he thought all night about what he was going to do. He reflected, and then that next morning he took action. And this action was a gunshot. A gunshot aimed at Lupe Campos. A gunshot to conceal the defendant's connections. A gunshot to tie up loose ends. A gunshot to protect his reputation. A gunshot fired from a black Sig Sauer. The same type of gun that Detective Abdulahi seized in the defendant's home. The same type of gun that Lupe Campos identified today on the stand. This was an action to kill Lupe Campos. This was an action in furtherance of the defendant's objective. An action to conceal his connections. Which is why I ask you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of this jury. Why? Why did the supposed victim lie about knowing Finn Omali? Why did the supposed victim say that he couldn't remember the meeting that happened 4 days before the shooting in Duran's restaurant? Why did the supposed victim receive the exact amount of money that was in an audio recording in which he accepted the money to be shot? But most importantly, members of the jury, why didn't the police investigate any of this? It's because they set him up. And the police, they let him down. Now, the state cannot simply tell you that my client is guilty. They had to prove it to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this was not a setup. Members of the jury, that is the highest burden in our criminal justice system. It requires proof to a moral certainty. It means if you believe that there is even a possibility that this could have been a setup, you must return a verdict of not guilty. Now, the state has failed to meet this high burden, and to remember that, you only need to think about 3 things: the meeting, money, and the mistakes. But let's start with the meeting. The one that occurred in the corner of a dimly lit restaurant where people go where they don't want to be hurt. The one where Lupe Campos and Finn Omali made a plan to set my client up. Where Lupe Campos agreed to receive $25,000 in exchange for luring the defendant to his home and then being shot, taking a bullet from Finn Omali. That brings me to the second reason, which is the money itself. $25,000 1 day after the shooting occurred from Huckleberry Finn LLC. Is Huckleberry Finn connected to Finn Omali? Better yet, has the state proven that it is not? Well, the answer is no, but let's assume for a second that the state is right. Let's assume that Tajari Hakika made all of this up. The $25,000, mere coincidence. How is it possible that the recording Tajari Hakika claims they have has the exact amount of money that was deposited into Lupe Campos' account? Members of the jury, they're asking you to believe that this is pure coincidence. That is simply unbelievable. Which brings me to the third reason, the mistakes of the Phoenix PD. Detective Abdulahi told you that the state investigated this case for a whole 7 hours before they arrested my client. When they received evidence that exonerated him, proved that they had the wrong person, they not only ignored the evidence, they threw it under the rug. They hid it. They declared that the audio recording was fake. After one listen, they didn't investigate the meeting between Finn Omali and Lupe Campos. They didn't investigate the $25,000 from Huckleberry Finn, LLC. If you believe that there's even a possibility that the detective did not perform a thorough enough investigation, you must find my client not guilty. They tried to convince you that Mr. Trimble is a man with a lot of connections. The connection they're trying to hide from you today is the one between those two men sitting right there. The connection between Lupe Campos and Finn Omali. The meeting that Lupe Campos said, "Oh, I can't remember," and then Finn Omali follows up by saying, no, that meeting did occur. The one where Tajari Hakika tried to say, "I have an audio recording here you should listen to." And the detective listened to it once, threw it to the side with no testing or even impounding it, and said, "I'm not considering this evidence." Members of the jury, that is not how justice works. That's not how our system was built. You have to find the defendant not guilty, because they set him up, and the police did nothing but let him down. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, in the defense's attempt to raise reasonable doubt, they ask you to pay attention to three things: the meeting, the money, and the mistakes. Well, let's go through these one by one. First, with the meeting. Members of the jury, is it reasonable to rely on Tajari Hakika's testimony of this meeting when he is the only one who can recount that there was a scheme being conspired about? Is it reasonable to rely upon him when he told you on the stand today he would do anything to help his cousin? Now let's talk about the money. Members of the jury, today you heard from Finn Omali that he's incredibly that he doesn't have $25,000, not $25,000 he can give away to Lupe Campos. Is it reasonable to think that this money came from Finn Omali? And finally, the mistakes. Well, members of the jury, the defense tried to identify mistakes in Detective Abdulahi's investigation, but I remind you of a mistake in Hollis Trimble's testimony on the stand today. He told you that he parked in Lupe Campos' driveway when he made no mention of that in his sworn affidavit. So when you look at the meeting and the money and the mistakes, you'll see that we have left you with no reasonable doubt, and you should find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the court is going to start the timer for 1 minute, and each team may confer with their coaches to determine whether they want to lodge a rule violation. You may begin now. It appears that you do not need the 1 minute. Does the state want to lodge a rule violation?
No rule violations, Your Honor.
In defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so I understand that we still have a couple of jurors who still need to score and finish their scoring, so get after it. Would you like them to do that back in the jury deliberation room, or would you like them to do that here in the jury box? All right, so I'm going to have them tend to their business here, and the jurors, oh, you want to go in the back? All right. So all rise for the jury. You may be seated. I'm going to give you this opportunity. Do they still exchange the certificates? All right, so if you would just, do you have your certificates or do you need them?
If you don't have them, that's okay.
Okay, so, all right, so what I'd like you to just do for now is to confer to identify who you would identify as the outstanding attorney and the outstanding witness for each team.
Your Honor, we might need a copy of opposing counsel's roster just to make sure we get the,
You
the
may
names
approach.
right. Great, thank you, Your Honor.